So I'll keep quiet as it does a couple of laps, and you can go in the only car in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Tiger 131, and very excited though, I know you all are to see that. Can we just remind you all, please, sadly we'll have to go through all those COVID constructions we have today. There's plenty of room for you, but can we just suggest you step back onto the grass away from the edge so we keep you nicely separated. Thank you for following all the guidance we've been giving. It doesn't have to get out obviously we've got people here that it's going to be an awful lot too, so if you could just keep yourself separated. What we're going to do at the end of the display, just so you know as well, you can have a chance to have a closer look at some of the vehicles. At the end of the display, the Tiger will be driving off. It'll be going straight back into the museum with the Panzer III, so you'll be able to see it back in there. Watch the exhaust, they will be hot. Also, can you just also remember as well, if you want to, wait in your spaces, we'll move you out block at a time, but if you want to come into the arena afterwards and have a look at the tanks we parked up, we'll be able to do that at the end as well. We're going to open the gate down there by the Conservation Centre and the gate down here, but again, please do take your time, keep your social distancing, and we'll get you off so you can have a look at the arena. 3 o'clock, there's going to be a talk in the arena on this gun by Stuart from the archive, so he'll be having a chat about this pack gun we've got there as well. So, on with our display. So we park the Tiger up at the moment. When it starts again, we're going to be showing you how they would have started it using the inertia starter. It worked yesterday, we did it yesterday, of course an awful lot of sweat and bother for the guys, but basically they don't always start that tank by pressing the starter button. They actually do it using another system, almost thinking like using a starting handle on the back there, but we'll show you that at the end. Now, Tiger 131, you know the story. If you're interested in finding more about it, have a look at our nice little Hames manual we did, captured in North Africa, in Tunisia. As I said, evaluated, a lot written about this particular tank. The King sees it, Churchill climbs on it, out in Tunis. It's presented as a gift on Horse Guards Parade to Churchill. He's not actually there at the time, he's in Marrakesh, he's had a heart attack. But it's a very, very famous tank, and obviously we're really pleased to have it here at the museum and be able to run it. But as you can imagine, with any 70-year-old vehicle, we have a host of issues, hence always keeping an eye. It's a petrol vehicle, the last thing we want is a petrol leak and an engine fire, hence we're always keeping an eye to set under shore. So they load out the 6-pounder barrels to take the American ammunition, and that's what's on this tank here. It's basically a 6-pounder gun that's been made into a quick firing, as they called it, 75mm, so it can be really useful for supporting the infantry. Now, we're always like thinking in Britain, if you read all the books on it, weren't British tanks rubbish, wasn't the Tiger great? That Churchill had more armour protection on the front than the Tiger tank. And it also could go places most other tanks couldn't get to. So it had tremendous success in certain engagements in Northumbria, Italy. There's a famous battle where a Churchill tank goes around the back of a hill, climbs up the hill, and the German officer complained when they had to surrender that it was very unsporting because tanks shouldn't get to places like that. So we have to be careful when we're judging tanks. This idea about hot trucks one against one, of course, quite often we're not necessarily just going out to fight against other tanks. They're there to do other jobs on the battlefield. No way do you want to be going up against a Tiger in a Churchill, but they do. And obviously, this tank can't be captured by the use of Churchill tanks. Now this Churchill, you can see, very different suspension system compared to the Tiger. The Tiger uses those interleaved rope wheels. Looks complex, it is complex. They're then attached to a torsion bar suspension, so it's a metal rod that runs across the floor of the tank and is twisted to give a spring. The idea of the interleaving the rope wheels means that you can put more weight on your tracks and spread that weight out. The Churchill with its smaller rope wheels doesn't need to go very fast, so it doesn't matter those poor wheels are turning around very quickly there. Very thick armour on the front, and with this Mark III, a new type of slab-sided turret. And the Churchill, of course, was great for adapting, so you'll see inside, that's the tank we used to make the armoured vehicle Royal Engineers, or Agries, that we used on D-Day with a big petard mortar on the front. Now another classic German tank coming on now. This is the Panzer III that was the tank alongside the Panzer IV that the Germans really wanted to be produced in large numbers, ready for whatever war was coming. There weren't enough of them ready in 1939 when it began to war. So Germany was using all sorts of other tanks, Panzer ones as well, but this and the Panzer IV was really their mainstay tanks at the beginning of the war. Now the Germans have been experimenting, even though they were banned from any tanks at all by the Versailles Peace Treaty, they've been experimenting with tank design, tied up with the Russians, Soviet Russia. They sent engineers out to Kazan in Russia, and when Hitler comes to power, they basically rip up the Versailles Peace Treaty in 1933 and go all out for designing tanks. They haven't built any tanks, 20 A7V tanks built in Germany, World War I. So they're learning the art of building tanks as they're making Panzer I and Panzer II, mainly for training. They could go and fight in them, but when you see them, you'll see they're very small, very light vehicles. It's the Panzer III and Panzer IV is the tanks they wanted. The Panzer IV, short-barreled stubby gun on it, 7.5 centimetres, the size of the hole at the end of the barrel. It was a howitzer. and it was supposed to do the role of the infantry tank to a certain degree. In other words, support the troops advancing, firing high explosive rounds. It was called an escort vehicle, or BW in German. So that was a Panzer IV. This one's a Panzer III. 3 Panzer IIIs were made for every 1 Panzer IV, and this is the tank they wanted to then exploit any breakthrough. It was going to be more mobile, faster. It starts with a 37mm anti-tank gun on it, and that gets improved. So here we've got a longer barrel, 50mm. It says standard anti-tank gun, and that bulbous bit muzzle brake at the end. So it's a powerful gun they managed to put on it. The trouble with the Panzer III, because it was smaller than the Panzer IV, it didn't have enough room to carry on being improved on. So by the N model, the Germans, instead of saying Mark I, Mark II, they do Ausführung, which means model, and they do it with letters. So A, B, C, this particular one's an L model, they get to N, and by N they've run out of steam. They've got nowhere else they can improve on. So they actually improved the Panzer IV because it's bigger, and that's its service right to the end of the war. Panzer III goes out of service in about 1944, though you'll still see them driven around, and it's the basis for that famous other vehicle they use called the Sturmgeschütz. But you can see this has got a Maybach HL120 TRN engine in the back. It's a Maybach, makes all the engines for the German tanks in the Second World War. It's a very quiet vehicle. I know I'm yakking all the time, but you can hardly hear it driving around. That for a tank is very, very quiet. And it was a beautifully made tank. That's another thing that you look at with all this German engineering. Everything is finely crafted. And in some ways, that's another one of the arguments that the Germans found. They spent too much time and energy on building some of these vehicles. The Russians, and certainly the Americans, the Russians made the T-34 simpler and cheaper to make as the war went on. The Americans mass-produced the German much cheaper, and so you can make more of them quickly. Now this air model was captured in North Africa. It was sent back to Britain. You can see, like many German tanks, it's got extra armour bolted on the front. That's another outcome of Hitler being involved in the German tank project. He insists on more armour at the expense of speed most of the time. And this tank also shows some of the vehicles we've got in the collection. It's got battle damage on it, you can actually see one of its front drive sprockets. Engine in the back, transmission through to the front where the gearbox is, and those two wheels on the front, the only wheels powered by the engine, they're the ones that bite into the track and pull the vehicle along. And the downside of having the wheels at the front, you'll see some vehicles have the drive sprocket at the back. Downside of having it at the front is it's more vulnerable because that's where you're, if you lose a transmission wheel, you're not going to go anywhere. And the other thing is, of course, it means that you've got a drive shaft going right through the middle of the tank. So if you're really clever, if you look at some of the German tanks, the turret looks like it's in the middle, but it's not. It's slightly to one side, so that the base of the turret doesn't interfere with the drive sprocket that's going right to the front, which needs to be in the middle of the tank. Now this is a tank coming out now. This is one of the vehicles that amazingly starts the German fighter program. The Matilda 1 and the Matilda 2 that we're seeing here, they were being used in small numbers by the Grand Infantry Corps in France in 1930, and they scared the hell out of the Germans because they had such thick armour on the front of them. locking the track, changing the angle of the vehicle, and then manoeuvring on again. You can see that how he's driving. Now the two-hander anti-tank gun on it, when it goes into service, that gun goes to any known German tank from 1940 to about 41. It's a very effective anti-tank gun. There is a terrible tendency, we all look back and oh, it was a big shooter, it's too small. It was really effective early on. The materials, as I say, they frightened the Germans in France, and they were part of the force that completely knocks out 250,000 Italians surrender in North Africa in a campaign that we often forget about under someone called Roger O'Connor. He sends an armoured force across the desert, cuts off a huge Italian army that's mainly marching, and completely wins the battle, but then sadly has to decimate his force to send most of them off to fight in Greece. And that gives the opportunity of the Germans to reinforce the Italians in North Africa, that leads to our friendly Tiger 131 out there going over at the end of the battles in Tunisia. When those battles in Tunisia end, more Germans and Italian soldiers surrendered at Stalingrad. It's one of those peculiar death campaigns that Hitler wakes up to a bit too late, sends all his latest equipment, including 2 battalions of these fantastic, expensive new target tanks, all to no avail. They end up all being captured. Now, on the tour of Duncan Park down the far end, we're well down the road now. It's a vehicle we discovered about a year or so ago. If you're interested in vehicle restoration, have a look online. We've recorded that. It's called the Tour Diaries, and it's on our YouTube channel, like lots of the other things. You can watch it all for free. There's lots of good videos there which you might be interested in if you want to know more about some of the tanks, how we look after them, and that particular vehicle went for a fairly lengthy restoration job. Now the Material 2 was actually replaced as an infantry tank by a tank called the Valentine, but we ended up using that more as a different sort of tank, as a cruiser tank, because it was a fair bit lighter. And the Churchill here ended up being the next generation infantry tank that went into service. Because of our emphasis in Britain till later in 1941 of building aeroplanes, it was almost like our tank production, or the design side, went on hold for a while. And the great news was, when the Americans were in the war, they start supplying us with M3 Grant tanks and then the famous M4 Sherman tank. So for Britain, that was great because we could concentrate on what we were good at and what was winning for us, which was aircraft. It was only later, in later 1942, that we re-gear up our tank design program and we start manufacturing vehicles that, if we're honest, should have probably come out a year or two earlier, but we had this gap in our production or our design of new tanks. So we have a tank called the Cromwell, and that is followed by this tank here called the Comet, which is actually a very effective tank, but doesn't see action in Europe till the winter of 44-45. Spitfire, the Merlin, they could now make enough of that they could be used in tanks as well. So we ended up calling it the Meteor when it goes in the tank, and that's what you're listening to, that Comet tank. That's basically a Spitfire engine in the back slightly derated. They started by putting a silencer on the back. It made no difference to the noise level at all. So at the end, if you look at this tank on the roller, there's just two little front-tail exhausts, no silencer at all. And it was no point trying to hide the fact they know you're happy when you do anything like that. And that, of course, is part of the psychological effect of something like a tank as well. You've got to be a very, very stoic infantry to sit in the trench and hear that coming towards you without doing something about it. Now the Comet has what they call a 77mm high velocity gun. They ended up getting the round that was fired by the 17-pounder on the Sturman Firefly. They got a new brass case off the old 3-inch gun and put the two together, and you ended up having a huge amount of kinetic energy behind the solid metal shot that was fired out the end of the barrel. And what's that? It also fired the Star Saturday, a slug of punch from the other part of the material away. So when they're firing those discarded Sabo rounds, that pop comes out the end, slug of tungsten in the middle, the sides fall away, the tungsten goes towards the target, almost supersonic speeds, and actually this gun had better penetration on enemy armour than the Panther's gun had, the 75mm on the famous German Panther tank, something again you can overlook. In terms of design, it was the last British tank that they had this stepped front. You can see a little round porthole where the driver's looking out. On the other side is a round bolted on structure that holds the Beza machine gun. And they finally realised it's much better to slope the front glasses plate. Don't put this step in because obviously if you're being fired at, you get better protection from an angled front plate than having that stepped plate there. And the next tank that Britain comes out with, the famous Centurion, you'll see it's got that lovely smooth front glasses plate. So they do away with that stepped arrangement for the machine gun. So there's some classic Second World War armour we brought out for you. And what we'd like to do now is I'm just going to see if Mike wants to come on the arena. He's going to come over and we're going to ask him a question or two about the Tiger. Aren't you, Mike? Yeah, come on. So our Tiger 131, as I say, was the first restoration began all the way back in 1998. What Mike has done over those years is he's been kind of marshalling the vehicle in many ways and looking after it. After the first restoration was done up the road here at a place called Abro, lovely chaps, really nice guys, very good at maintaining modern tanks. They weren't so sympathetic with the older vehicles like Tiger 131. So what Mike did was he supervised the second restoration that went on and has basically looked after this tank all the time subsequently. Other people obviously got volunteers, lots of people involved. But the thing about why I just mentioned this before he gets in the earshot, Mike Mason, he's probably worked on this Tiger longer than any German crewman ever did in World War II. So we've had that benefit of being able to look at, play with these vehicles for all that amount of time.
The starting handle is similar to a car, but much bigger and a lot heavier, and it takes two people to use it. Just so out of interest, the tank has 48 wheels, and if there's a problem with suspension on the middle of the tank, you might have to remove as many as 8 wheels to be able to get to the part to see the broken or needs replacing. So it's an incredibly complicated, long sort of method to do these things, but 1942 was pretty revolutionary. So we've got Matt, who's our workshop manager, with a hat on, and Nigel, who's a volunteer, and they volunteered to turn the starting handle. We normally give it to somebody that we don't like, but today we like these two. Okay, so they'll start turning it now, and hopefully, by the time we get up to speed. Oh, we've got a little bit of a malfunction, hang on. Going back to gear changing with the tank, while this is repaired. So when our driver's going along, he has two things to do. One to look where he's going, and one to keep his eye on the rep counter. And the engine operates on the green zone, which is between 2,200 revs per minute and 3,000. And when he gets to the point where he wants to change gear, the gear lever is only about 2 or 3 inches long, and he selects whichever gear he wants, presses the gear lever over to his right, and that operates hydraulic solenoids inside the gearbox. And so all the rest is then done by the tank. It selects the gear, it revs the engine, it operates the clutch, which is like a car, the engine revs come back up, and the tank's change gear. And all the driver has to do is keep the revs in the green zone. In my opinion, probably a lot of Tigers were gearboxes were broken, because if you try to change gear to much lower revs per minute, then everything breaks, and I'm sure a lot of Tigers were lost because of inexperience when changing gear. So I think we're ready for another go now. Right, here we go. So there's our engine starter. And we'll play it once again. Thank you very much. Well, then you have to go with it.
So, that's something you might see too often, which is people, it's not right about starting, is it? But it's like, where it's starting the type of tank. Now again, going back to one of the things we try to make the point all the time is, imagine trying to do that in a hurry with the Russians coming at you. It's not likely to go that way, is it? So, tanks are not, we always say this, like your family car. I know it sounds an obvious thing to say, but you don't jump in a tank and just turn on the engine and off you go. On average, a Tiger was 10 hours maintenance for 1 hour's driving. So that's an awful lot of time. And they break down, like even water tanks, they break down very, very often. Lots of hard work if a track breaks or a wheel needs replacing. That's again why they, in the British Army, they were talking about having a 3-man tank crew. They've insisted it remains at 4 men at least, because you physically need that number of people to maintain and keep the vehicle going. Now, what we're going to be doing when that vehicle, when they're all ready to go, the Tiger will be doing another lap, so you've got another chance to take a photo if you want to, and will be being joined by the Panzer III. It will then be exiting, going back in the museum, so you'll be able to see it when he goes back in there. And if you don't mind, please just wait in your places till we ask you to leave the arena by colour section, just so we don't have everybody going out at the same time. If you want to stay in the arena, please do, and then we'll open up the gate so you can come in and take a closer look at the other vehicles that will remain in the arena. Please do remember, if you go around the back of them, they will have hot exhaust, so watch it where you put your hands or where you might be touching or anything that way. And I'll remind you again, 12 o'clock if you're interested, we will be having Stuart will give a talk in the arena of this whopping great big pack gun, the Pack 43 there. That's an 88mm gun, but it's that bigger, longer gun that was put on the King Tiger. So it was a replacement for the 44. They stopped making Tiger ones, and they go on to an even bigger tank, the King Tiger. You can see our King Tiger inside our new World War II hall. So the museum's open till 6 o'clock. Don't waste all your money in the shop. And can I just say again, thank you so much for turning up today. We've had to limit numbers. Sorry if any of this COVID-19 stuff gets in the way, but pleased to see you've all been behaving yourselves, so thank you for coming along. And do please keep supporting us. We are an independent charity. Frankly, if we don't get an audience, I don't get paid and the tanks don't get looked after. So, well done, whoever bought the ticket today. And I know, I'm going to embarrass a couple of people now, there's a couple of people here because it's special birthdays. I know yesterday we had actually more birthdays. Who's here with a birthday? I've got one over there, so embarrassed to put his hand up. There you go, well done. 87 going on, what is it, 35 or something now? Anyone else got a birthday? We had a nice little boy, got overexcited yesterday because he actually thought we put all this on just for his birthday. No more birthdays. But anyway, well done, gentlemen, well done, somebody who bought in the ticket. So, ladies and gentlemen, just